There are not many opportunities in life where you'll find yourself in the middle of a $10 billion fight. These are battles reserved for billionaires, when massive corporations clash over acquisitions, when empires collide over land and power. But what if I told you that the biggest legal battle involving Donald Trump right now isn't over companies or real estate or politics? It's over a birthday card. Not just any birthday card. A birthday card that might reveal secrets powerful enough to bring down presidents, princes, and billionaires. A birthday card that sits on page 165 of a 250-page book celebrating Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday. If you're ready to dive deep into this story, hit that subscribe button, because this gets darker than you can imagine. Picture this: a man dies in a prison cell under mysterious circumstances. His alleged accomplice sits behind bars. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it's only beginning. What if I told you that before Jeffrey Epstein died, someone was actively scrubbing the internet clean of his crimes? Hacking Wikipedia. Pushing down damaging articles in Google searches. Fighting a cyber war to protect a convicted sex offender's reputation. And that person? He ended up at the bottom of a cliff in France, missing a hand and a foot, allegedly eaten by wild boars. Welcome to the rabbit hole of the Epstein files. Where optical illusions become reality, where party invitations lead to Nobel Prize winners, and where a British socialite claims she barely knew the man she spent decades beside. I'm about to take you through one of the most disturbing cases of our time, featuring newly released emails, a shocking prison interview, and connections that reach the highest levels of power. This isn't conspiracy theory. These are court documents, released emails, and recorded interviews. Before we dive deep into this 48-minute investigation, I need to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you make it to the end of this video, comment, "Still watching," so I can see who stayed for the full story. Now, let's begin with a man who threw the most exclusive parties in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, being the best party planner isn't just about caviar and ice sculptures. It's about connections, power, access. And one man named Al Seckel seemed to have mastered this art without any of the traditional trappings of LA excess. Al didn't serve his guests McDonald's chicken nuggets paired with caviar to signal wealth. He didn't have bathroom trays for cocaine. Instead, he sent mysterious invitations: bring a copy of the book you have most enjoyed. Or, bring the most interesting person you've ever met. Imagine receiving that invitation. You'd spend days agonizing over it, wouldn't you? Do they mean a fun book? Educational? Self-help? The most entertaining read? And how do you even convince the most interesting person you know to come with you, because by definition, you're not the most interesting person if they are. But when you arrived at Al's house, you'd find yourself surrounded by Nobel Prize-winning physicists, NASA employees who couldn't tell you what they did, magicians, and celebrities who weren't even the stars of the party. Al himself would greet you like an old friend, even though he looked decades older than you, asking about your drive up the hills, the traffic, and somehow, you'd end up standing in front of a painting that seemed to move. Reality is that which exists independently of your perception or beliefs, Al would say. Your perception may be aligned with reality, and then it may not be, and you wouldn't know. Al Seckel was known as the world's greatest collector of optical illusions. He'd made his fortune dealing rare books, or so the story went. He'd written multiple books on optical illusions and given TED Talks that had crowds laughing and applauding. In one talk, he showed an image that adults saw as something sexual, but children under 10 saw as dolphins. "This is the best example of priming by experience that I know," he'd say. "If you are a child under the age of 10 who hasn't been ruined yet, you will look at this image and see dolphins." Hasn't been ruined yet. An odd choice of words, don't you think? He'd show another image, a child's drawing of what they wanted to be when they grew up. The drawing appeared to show someone dancing on a pole with people holding up cash. The child had written, "I want to be just like mommy." The crowd would laugh nervously. Then Al would reveal the truth. The mother worked at Home Depot and had told her daughter about selling the last snow shovel before a blizzard, with customers fighting over it. It was all optical illusions. All misdirection. All about perception versus reality. But in December 2010, reality came crashing through Al Seckel's carefully constructed illusions. The email that changed everything. On December 16, 2010, Al Seckel sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein. Remember, this was after Epstein's first conviction in 2008. The email read, "The job was far worse than originally expected. You have a dedicated group of people trying to undo and damage you, including now they have started up again last week full force. It's obvious that they can't fuck with your wiki page because we blocked that. Let that sink in." Al Seckel was actively preventing people from editing Jeffrey Epstein's Wikipedia page. But it gets worse. The email continued, "The woman from the Daily Beast who wrote an article about you, we have programs that track this stuff. For the past few days, Mike has been having a cyber war with her minions who are actively trying to undo what we are doing. She's trying to push her Daily Beast and other articles back up, so we have to go back and push them back down in the Google searches." Al Seckel wasn't just protecting Epstein's reputation. He was waging a full-scale information war. He wrote, "I spent literally 4 months of non-stop work creatively and my own political capital to get you this far, which saved you not only time but countless dollars. The results? We did manage to get rid of the Daily Beast article, which is now far removed. Wikipedia was an important victory and it will always be at the top of search engine results. Now the headlines do not mention convicted sex offender or pedophile. Instead, philanthropic work, Epstein Foundation, promotion of scientists. Your wiki entry now is pretty tame and bad stuff has been muted and pushed to the bottom. We also hacked this site to replace the mugshot in the caption. They hacked Wikipedia. These emails are from 2010, years before most people even knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. But who was Al Seckel? Why would he go to such lengths for Epstein? Was it just another one of Epstein's friends owing him a favor? No. Al Seckel was much closer than that. He was Ghislaine Maxwell's brother-in-law, dating her sister. And soon after these emails were revealed, Al Seckel went missing. Weeks later, investigators in France detected a stench. At the bottom of a 100-foot cliff, they found Al Seckel's body. He was missing a hand and a foot, likely eaten by wild boars, according to reports. The year was 2015. The official ruling? Self-exit. But here's where things get interesting. There were allegations that Al had been a fraudulent rare book seller. The optical illusion expert, it seemed, had been running illusions of his own. And when the questions got too close, he allegedly ended up at the bottom of a cliff. The question everyone asks, how many self-exits connected to one case is too many? And more importantly, why was Al Seckel so invested in protecting Jeffrey Epstein's image? If you're finding this information shocking, you need to hear what comes next. But first, if you're enjoying this deep dive and want to stay informed about cases like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Content like this helps protect you and your loved ones by exposing the truth about predators and their networks. Share this with someone who needs to know. Now, let's talk about how close we came to never learning any of this. In the labyrinth of American politics, there's a place where bills go to die, the committee. Before any bill reaches the congressional floor for a vote, it must pass through committee review. And 90 to 95% of them never make it out. The Jeffrey Epstein Transparency Act seemed destined for the same fate. Think about it, why wouldn't everyone want to know more about those involved with Epstein? It seems obvious, right? But as we're about to discover, there were powerful forces working to ensure this bill never saw the light of day. The act was a bipartisan effort from Democrat Ro Khanna of California and Republican Thomas Massie of Kentucky. On paper, this should have been easy, both parties coming together to expose the truth about a convicted sex offender and those in his network. But when Republican leadership found out what Thomas Massie was doing, they weren't happy. And neither was Donald Trump. Trump attacked Massie on social media, calling him a real loser. He posted, "Thomas Massie is the worst Republican congressman and almost a guaranteed no vote each and every time. He's an embarrassment with a capital E to Kentucky. He's lazy, slow-moving, and totally disingenuous. A real loser. Never has anything positive to add. Looking for someone good to run against this guy. Someone I can capital E endorse and vigorously campaign for. Capital E for Epstein?" The internet certainly noticed. Trump even went after Massie's personal life. When Massie remarried a year after his wife died in 2024, Trump posted, "Boy, that was quick. No wonder the polls have him at less than 8% chance of winning the election. Anyway, have a great life, Thomas Ann." Because Trump didn't even know the new wife's name. His wife will soon find out that she's stuck with a loser. The attacks were personal. The attacks were vicious. But Massie came out swinging too. In an interview, Massie stated, "The deal for Republicans on this vote is that Trump will protect you if you vote the wrong way. In other words, if you vote to cover up for pedophiles, you've got cover in the Republican primary. But I would remind my colleagues that this vote is going to be on your record for longer than Trump is going to be president. What are you going to do in 2028 and 2030 when you're in a debate with a Republican or a Democrat and they say, 'How can we trust you when you covered up for a pedophile back in 2025? Even the MAGA base was conflicted. While party leadership opposed the act, a significant portion of the base sided with transparency. Republican Speaker of the House Mike Johnson opposed the discharge petition, claiming he was worried about the victims. Though most believed he was simply following Trump's directives. The four who changed everything. This is where the story gets dramatic. Because the bill was going to die in committee unless something extraordinary happened. Congressman Khanna and Thomas Massie did something called a discharge petition, essentially a way to bypass the committee and force a vote on the House floor. But here's the catch. You need 218 signatures out of 435 House representatives. And those 218 members have to physically go to the clerk's desk in the House chamber to sign the document. No DocuSign. No email. Physical signatures. And this is where 3 Republican House representatives broke ranks with their party leadership: Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Lauren Boebert of Colorado, and Nancy Mace of South Carolina. These 3 women, along with Thomas Massie, became the only Republicans to sign the discharge petition. Every single Democrat signed it. 4 people. 4 Republicans changed everything. But there was drama even in getting to 218. A Democratic House representative had passed away, and his daughter was elected to take his seat. She was clearly going to sign, she was a Democrat. But Republican leadership kept delaying her swearing-in ceremony. Speaker Mike Johnson said they couldn't swear her in because of the government shutdown. Then it was the weekend. Then it was, we only meet certain times of the month. Everyone kept asking, why can't you swear her in? People have been sworn in without everyone present before. Johnson's response? No, no, no. It's for her. I want her to get the full experience of being sworn in. It's a whole thing, a whole ordeal. The subtext was clear, they didn't want her vote. But ultimately, pressure mounted. She was sworn in. The discharge petition got exactly 218 signatures. To put this in perspective, the modern discharge rule was established in 1931. Out of 673 discharge petitions filed since then, only 47 have gotten the required 218 signatures. And out of those, only a handful have actually passed into law. The odds were astronomically against the Epstein Transparency Act. The vote that shocked Washington. But it made it to the House floor. And the House voted 427 to 1. One person voted no. One lone dissenting voice, Republican Clay Higgins of Louisiana. Higgins argued that the release could cause undue harm to innocent witnesses and family members related to the case. He wrote on X, "It abandons 250 years of criminal justice procedure in America. This bill reveals and injures thousands of innocent people, witnesses, people who have provided alibis, family members. This type of broad reveal of criminal investigative files released to a rabid media will absolutely result in innocent people being hurt." But 427 representatives disagreed. By the time the vote happened, even Trump had reversed course, telling Republicans to just vote yes. The political winds had shifted. Everyone could see that opposing transparency made them look guilty. The bill moved to the Senate, where it passed unanimously, not because every senator showed up and voted, but because when asked if there were any objections, there was silence. Passed. On November 19, 2025, the bill landed on President Trump's desk. And he signed it into law. But here's what you need to understand: this wasn't the feel-good bipartisan moment the media made it out to be. This was a bill that nearly died multiple times. This was a bill that required 4 Republicans to break ranks with their entire party. This was a bill that required immense public pressure. And when those files started coming out, the emails, the flight logs, the connections, the question became, what will actually happen with this information? Because as we're about to see in Ghislaine Maxwell's prison interview, sometimes transparency doesn't equal accountability. Let me ask you this: do you think the full truth will ever come out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're still with me at this point, comment, "Still watching," so I know you're following this twisted story. Now let's dive into why so many people believe Epstein wasn't just a wealthy predator, but possibly something much more dangerous. There's a theory that's been circulating since before Epstein's death, that he wasn't just a financier or a predator, but an intelligence officer, a spy working for a foreign nation. The main theory? That he was working for Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad. Now, before you dismiss this as conspiracy theory, let's look at the evidence. First, consider Epstein's connections. Reading through his emails, you notice something strange: he doesn't align himself with one political party. When talking to Republicans, he takes Republican viewpoints. When talking to Democrats, he becomes more Democratic. He's a chameleon, changing his colors based on his audience. But his connections span far beyond American politics. He's deeply connected to international leaders, foreign governments, and global power brokers. And then there are the alleged tapes. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, has stated that she's seen tens of thousands of tapes of child exploitation material that was downloaded by Epstein. But here's where it gets strange: she says these tapes were between Epstein and minors, but they were never found. Wait, she's seen them, but they weren't found? What does that even mean? The speculation is that these tapes exist but are being held by intelligence agencies, not by the DOJ. And if that's true, it would mean Epstein wasn't keeping these tapes for personal gratification, he was keeping them for blackmail and intelligence gathering. Here's what makes this theory compelling: almost every victim who has come forward has stated they do not recall being filmed during their abuse. Virginia Giuffre, Sarah Ransom, Maria Farmer, none of them remember cameras. But many of them remember Epstein and Ghislaine talking about having power over the powerful men these girls were trafficked to. So if the tapes aren't of Epstein himself, who are they of? The theory suggests Epstein and Ghislaine were running a honeypot operation, luring powerful men into compromising situations, recording them, and using that material for blackmail and intelligence purposes. When Epstein's Kindle purchase history was released in the document dump, it painted a fascinating picture of his interests: and how they evolved over time. In the beginning, he's reading books like Conversations with a Mathematician, Exploring Randomness, even The Jesus Dynasty, A Hidden History of Jesus, His Royal Family, and the Birth of Christianity. Then he moves into books about family wealth management, dealing with the ultra-wealthy, Bitcoin, and blockchain technology. He purchases at least 4 separate books about Donald Trump. Another about gay Catholic priests. One titled The Serious Guide to Joke Writing. But in 2014, his interests take a turn. He purchases The Man from ORGY, a spy novel about a man who does odd jobs here and there for the most secret of American spy organizations, described as definitely not the CIA. The character's expertise in intimate relations makes him perfect for international espionage. Epstein starts reading multiple spy novels. He also purchases The Complete Guide to Men's Pilates and The Physics of Immortality, which discusses how humans can be resurrected. Virginia Giuffre writes in her memoir, "I'll tell you one thing, though. While I've read that Epstein was buried in an unmarked grave not far from his parents in Palm Beach, Florida, I don't believe that at all. Epstein had repeatedly told me exactly what would happen when he died. His body would be placed in some sort of cryogenic chamber to be preserved until technology advanced far enough to bring him back to life. That's what he always bragged to me with that satisfied smirk on his face. I know it sounds far-fetched, but I wouldn't bet against the notion that he somehow got his way on this." One of Epstein's last book purchases, just 3 months before his death in prison, was Lolita, the annotated and revised version, about a man obsessed with a 12-year-old girl. But the most disturbing purchase? Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. The timing is eerie. Epstein reads a book about Israel's assassination program, and then he dies in prison under suspicious circumstances. The mysterious emails. But the real evidence for the spy theory comes from Epstein's emails, which reveal knowledge and connections that don't fit the profile of a simple financial advisor or sexual predator. In one email, someone asks Epstein about being an offset service provider in military contracts. Epstein responds with detailed knowledge about fighter jet deals, explaining, "Someone buys fighter jets, but with the fighter money, some must be used for specific third-party items. Brazil has tried to buy fighters in the past. They don't have a lot of money." The conversation continues with discussion of deals involving Sweden, the USA, Brazil's President, Obama, and Warren Buffett. This isn't casual knowledge. This is insider information about international military contracts. In another email, Epstein tells someone, "I passed your message. I'm not sure what role you and your boss would like to play in the Yemen issue moving forward. The rebel leaders are ready to propose a document. They would like a ceasefire. If you'd like, I could pass on their proposal. This is not what I do. My expertise is only money, but it seems like your part of the world would like advice." He's mediating ceasefires in Yemen. How does a supposed financier have access to rebel leaders in an active war zone? In another text message, Epstein writes about China, "Spoke to my China guys and they said China stronger, plays weakened, strife, art of war, etc. All the players are Xi loyalists. Main complaint is that there's no counterparty in US, either no one home or new to the game." Just a year before his death, he texts, "I had 3 China guys today. I told them that they should brief you. There's a 40-year anniversary in Beijing of the beginning of Economic Growth Initiative." In 2017, just 2 years before his death, he's meeting with the Mongolian ambassador to the UN. He's emailing about conversations with members of the Ambani family, one of India's wealthiest dynasties. He writes, India-Israel key not for email. Netizens have interpreted this as Epstein telling an Ambani family member that the key to improving India-US relations is through Israel. There are also photos of Epstein with African warlords. When asked about this in her prison interview, Ghislaine offers a bizarre explanation. She claims Epstein had a business idea where if a billionaire or cartel had money stolen from them, he would track it down, recover it, and take a percentage as his fee. She uses the example of a cartel boss having money stolen. Epstein would find the $1 billion and return most of it, keeping a portion. But what does any of that have to do with African warlords? The explanation makes no sense, unless Epstein was involved in international criminal networks and intelligence operations. Perhaps most disturbing are Epstein's personal notes, bizarre numbered lists he would email to himself, like a coded journal. 26. Taste. Food. Kissing. 27. Dreaming all day long. 28. Only 6 senses. 26. Money, agreements, debt, power, value, wealth, cost. And at the bottom of these lists? Names: Hopkins, Danny, Chomsky, Thiel, Hoffman, Ehud, Bannon, Barack, Woody. Netizens speculate these numbers correspond to his last conversations with these people, a reference system so he could remember what they discussed or what their interests were. But why wouldn't he just write it in a normal journal if he didn't expect these emails to go public? Why the code? Why the deliberate obfuscation? Unless he was trained to write in code. Unless he always expected someone else might have access to these emails. Unless he was reporting to someone. The spy theory suggests Epstein wasn't working alone, he was part of a larger intelligence operation, possibly involving multiple countries, using sexual blackmail to control the world's most powerful people. And there's only one person left alive who might know the full truth, Ghislaine Maxwell. So when the Department of Justice decided to interview her in July 2025, the world waited to hear what she would reveal. Would she confirm the spy theory? Would she name names? Would she finally tell the truth about her decades with Jeffrey Epstein? What we got instead was one of the most frustrating, evasive, and ultimately revealing interviews ever conducted with a convicted sex trafficker. July 24, 2025. 10:12 a.m. Only a few people are allowed in the room when Ghislaine Maxwell sits down for what would be her first and possibly last extensive interview: Spencer Horn, Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Diego Pestana, Associate Deputy Attorney General. Mark Beard from the U.S. Marshals. And Ghislaine's attorneys, David Marcus and Leah Safian. Todd Blanche opens, "This is the proffer interview of Ghislaine Maxwell." He explains what a proffer agreement is. Essentially, it's not a cooperation agreement. The government isn't promising anything. They're just talking. But what Ghislaine says today, the government cannot use against her, with exceptions for perjury. Blanche continues, "Miss Maxwell, about a week and a half or 2 ago, Mr. Marcus, your attorney, reached out to me and said that you wanted to speak with somebody from the government about not only your case but about everything that's been in the media about Mr. Epstein and your case." Here's where it gets interesting. Why is Ghislaine telling all of this without any promise of reduced sentence or early release? When has the government ever listened to someone convicted of trafficking minors without offering something in return? And the timing is suspicious. This interview is happening while the Trump administration is under fire for connections to Epstein. Todd Blanche isn't just the Deputy Attorney General, he was Trump's personal attorney. This is the first time we really hear from Ghislaine herself. She never testified during her trial. Her trial was in federal court, never live-streamed. We only know Ghislaine from what others have said about her, from the documents, from victim testimony. Now we hear her voice. Her accent. Her excuses. And she's exactly as manipulative as you'd imagine. "I barely knew him. Ghislaine starts by complaining that nobody from the government ever wanted to talk to her, even when she was first indicted. She says she always wanted to talk to SDNY, the Southern District of New York, but they wouldn't meet with her. Side note, Maureen Comey, daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, was a prosecutor at SDNY who worked on both Epstein's case and Ghislaine's trial. She was recently fired during all this Epstein files drama. The timing is interesting. Ghislaine then tells her version of how she met Epstein. She claims a friend said, "You're almost 30, as if that's ancient, and a girlfriend of mine, an American, told me after I'd broken up with my longtime boyfriend, I got a guy for you to meet. The friend says this guy is dating my sister. You'd love him. He's looking for a wife. Imagine, hey, you need a boyfriend. My sister's boyfriend would be perfect for you. You guys should get married." And apparently, that's what happened. Ghislaine meets him at his office where she notices a giant ketchup stain on his tie. And she was supposedly so smitten by this ketchup stain that she thought, "Yes, I will commit atrocious felonies with you." Then she drops this bombshell: she slept with Epstein once. Just once. In 1992. "I slept with him one time and I was like, oh, that's it. We're going to be dating. I never slept a single night in his house, ever." They were never really dating, per se. Blanche asks, "Were you in a romantic relationship with him at this point or just friends?" "Just friends." She then claims Epstein told her he had a heart condition that meant he didn't have intercourse a lot. Which suited me fine because I actually do have a medical condition myself which precludes me from having a lot of intercourse. Blanche, what was your understanding of his heart condition and why that prevented him from having intercourse regularly? Ghislaine, I don't know. I mean, he liked other forms of sexual acts. He liked, and here she gets graphic about his preferences. He didn't seem to have any erectile dysfunction for certain acts, but sex he didn't have. So her entire defense rests on, I barely had relations with Epstein because he supposedly couldn't perform. Therefore, I couldn't have been involved in trafficking young girls for him. We weren't even that close. Ghislaine continues to downplay her relationship with Epstein. She claims that by 2003, she was in a full-blown relationship with another billionaire named Todd Wyatt. She likely means Ted Waite, founder of Gateway Computers. We had an amazing relationship that ended in 2010. I was with Ted from that time. She even claims she attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding as Ted's guest. And here's her punchline: back in those times, if you asked me where Epstein was, I would have no idea. I didn't even have the keys to his houses. I think it's crazy that everybody is saying we were joined at the hip, that we were body and soul. I barely saw the guy. If you asked me where he was at any given point, I don't think I would have had the answer. That's how detached we were. But wait, this is the same time frame when all the crimes were happening. Victims have testified that Ghislaine recruited them, groomed them, participated in their abuse. They've described her as Epstein's right hand, his partner, his accomplice. And she's claiming she barely saw the guy. Blanche asks about Epstein's 2008 arrest. When did you realize something was wrong with him? Ghislaine, I didn't even know that. I read through the press. She claims she had no idea Epstein was arrested until she read it in the news. No idea he was charged federally. Nobody from law enforcement contacted her before his arrest. She had no knowledge of them being interested in me honestly until he had died. Meanwhile, while Epstein was in prison serving his sweetheart deal, Ghislaine continued to take care of everything for him. And he kept paying her lots of money. Between 1999 and 2007, Ghislaine received approximately $30 million from Epstein. $18.3 million in 1999. $5.5 million in 2002. $7.4 million in 2007. Blanche, you were not paid that by Mr. Epstein for your benefit, even if it was put into your accounts? Ghislaine, I don't believe any of that was my money. $30 million. And she claims it wasn't hers. One of the most infuriating parts of the interview is when Ghislaine discusses the masseuses. She claims she would go to legitimate spas, not funky ones, and if she liked a masseuse, she'd ask if they did home visits. If they said yes, she'd bring them to see Epstein. But these were people who worked at spas. I never ever checked their age and I never checked their credentials. She insists she wasn't recruiting underage girls. She wasn't paying them. She wasn't even interacting with them much. She never saw anything sexual happen during a massage. But then Blanche says, "You're interacting with the masseuses constantly." Ghislaine, huh? And Blanche immediately walks it back, or maybe that's not right. That's not right. Let me take back what I just said. Ignore that part. What? Why is the Deputy Attorney General walking back his statement because she gave him a confused look? Why isn't he pushing back? This entire interview feels like Ghislaine is being coddled, not interrogated. It's non-confrontational to the point of being useless. But here's where things get truly bizarre. Multiple times during this 2-day interview, Ghislaine brings up Donald Trump, unprompted, to defend him. Near the end of day 1, she says, "May I say something? I just would like to put out there that I also focused on how I think the president got swept into some of this unnecessarily. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I certainly don't subscribe to everything that I see, but I do believe that there is animus in some areas that may have contributed to using the president to harm him, that I find deeply offensive. I would like to show you what I see so that you can evaluate it and do with that as you see fit." Nobody asked her about Trump. But she volunteers this defense anyway. Throughout the interview, whenever Trump's name comes up, Ghislaine is quick to say she never saw him do anything inappropriate. She never witnessed any misconduct. The media is lying about his involvement. It's strange. It's calculated. And it raises the question, is this interview part of a deal? Is Ghislaine protecting certain names in exchange for better treatment? Because after this interview, Ghislaine was moved from her harsh prison conditions to a low-security facility with access to phones, emails, weekend visits, recreational sports, and unlimited yard time. The timing is suspicious. The content is suspicious. The lack of pushback from prosecutors is suspicious. Perhaps the most disgusting part of the interview is when Ghislaine blames Virginia Giuffre for everything. The DOJ redacts Virginia's name in the transcript, but it's obvious from context that Ghislaine is talking about her. Ghislaine claims that Epstein's interest in underage masseuses started because of Virginia. That Virginia was the one recruiting young girls. That Virginia had been trained in all the arts of the sex program by her previous trafficker, Ron Eppinger, from age 14 or 15. Ghislaine says, in her book, she describes him training her to be what every man wants in all its manners. Fellatio and everything else. She's victim-blaming. She's saying that Virginia, who was trafficked as a child, was the real predator. Ghislaine continues, she takes up with the local drug dealer and she becomes druggy. You know how druggies, well, maybe you don't, I lived with a lot in Tallahassee, they become even more unreliable than normal. She's calling Virginia unreliable because she turned to drugs to cope with her trauma. And then, every single person who came to his house came through her and her boyfriend Tony and whoever else underneath her. That is how it started. This is particularly cruel because Virginia Giuffre died just a few months before this interview. She can't defend herself. She can't call out these lies. And Ghislaine knows it. Virginia wrote in her memoir, I had been trafficked to dozens of men by this point, and I remember their faces clearly. There were old men and even older men. Nerdy, shy men and boorish, arrogant men. There were men who wanted me to wear outfits and men who wanted to see me naked and men who didn't notice if I was clothed as long as I touched them. There were men who behaved as if I were lucky to be with them. And there was at least one man who ignored me as I serviced him sexually, preferring instead to focus his eyes upon and even fondle Epstein. One man was more interested in Epstein than in the girl he was abusing. Who was that man? The files don't say. But it's one of many unanswered questions. If this interview has taught us anything, it's that Ghislaine Maxwell has no intention of telling the truth. She will protect herself. She will protect certain powerful people. And she will blame the victims. But there's one more twist to this story that ties everything together, and it goes back to intelligence agencies, international politics, and the theory that Epstein was more than just a predator. Not deliberately. When Todd Blanche finally asks Ghislaine directly about intelligence connections, her answer is revealing. Have you ever had any contact with any representatives that you know from Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency? Ghislaine, can you ask me that again? Have you ever had any contact with any individuals that you understand to be from Mossad? Ghislaine, well, not deliberately. Not deliberately? What does that mean? She continues, I don't believe so, but I wouldn't know. I mean, I would be very surprised if he did. I don't think so. No. But then she brings up Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel. Off the top of my head, I can think of Ehud Barak. I think I met him, but I don't know if he was with Epstein or. I don't remember. I just know that I did see him and I'm trying to struggle to remember the context around it. But it must have been very brief because I don't have any serious memory of it. She can't remember meeting a former prime minister? Or she's being deliberately vague? Then she says something chilling, certainly my father had a background in intelligence. He was a British intelligence officer. I think that once you've been an intelligence officer, you've it doesn't mean that you're formally employed. So I don't think my dad in any formal sense was employed by the agency. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was deeply connected to Israeli intelligence. There have been allegations for decades that he was a Mossad asset. And when he died under mysterious circumstances, falling off his yacht in 1991, many suspected assassination. Ghislaine continues, I've had some interesting things that have happened in my life. One of them was I found out the IRA, so this is in Ireland, had me on their kidnap and murder list. The IRA wanted to kidnap and murder her? Why would Irish terrorists target Ghislaine Maxwell unless she was involved in British or Israeli intelligence operations? She says, after that happened, my father always wanted to put a lot of protection on me, obviously. But her father died in 1991. This interview was in 2025. Why is she still talking about protection from decades ago unless there's something ongoing? Then she drops this, anything that touches Israel or the state of Israel, I'm always interested in. My father loved Israel, and so I pay attention to it. We have ties to Israel, friends and family relations. Many have interpreted this statement as Ghislaine signaling to Israel, I'm not turning on you. I'm still loyal. The spy theory suggests that Epstein and Ghislaine weren't just predators, they were intelligence assets running a blackmail operation that compromised some of the world's most powerful people. The tapes, if they exist, would be the ultimate insurance policy. The ultimate leverage. And if that's true, it would explain why so many powerful people worked to protect Epstein. Why his first prosecution was a sweetheart deal. Why his Wikipedia was scrubbed. Why Al Sekel fought a cyber war on his behalf. Why Ghislaine's interview feels more like a negotiation than an interrogation. It would explain everything. Virginia Giuffre wrote on page 139 of her memoir. Nobody experiences trauma and emerges unscathed. I certainly haven't. Even before I met Epstein, I'd experienced awful things that have made some observers label me as his perfect victim. But I was also resilient, or I wouldn't be here now. I still have nightmares and panic attacks. I still have moments of feeling worthless. Perhaps I always will. But on many days, especially when I've been able to help another survivor, I thrive. My hope is that this book can shine some light at the darkness and force it to crawl back into its cave. My point is that while Jeffrey Epstein is dead and gone, there are many others around the world who are still committing the same kinds of crimes that he did. The Epstein files were supposed to be released by now. As you're watching this, they may have already come out. Or we may have gotten another dump of emails that confirm connections we already suspected but don't lead to prosecutions. Don't lead to justice. The question isn't just, who was in Epstein's network? The question is, will anyone actually be held accountable? Al Seckel is dead at the bottom of a cliff. Jeffrey Epstein is dead in a prison cell. But Ghislaine Maxwell is alive, serving 20 years, but possibly angling for a pardon. And everyone else in that network? They're still out there. Still powerful. Still protected. How many self-exits connected to one case is too many? How many coincidences before we call it a pattern? How many protected predators before we demand real transparency? I want to know what you think. Do you believe the full truth will ever come out? Do you think Ghislaine was telling the truth, or protecting powerful people? And what story should I cover next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you made it this far, all 48 minutes, comment, "Still watching," so I can see who stayed for the whole investigation. If this content opened your eyes to how predators operate at the highest levels of power, please share it with someone who needs to know. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an investigation like this. Because exposing the truth is the only way we protect future victims. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And remember, sometimes the biggest illusions are the ones we're told are reality. I'll see you in the next one.